Welcome back to Maria the Hedgehog Reads Chapter 15 of The Walking Dead Hope. I'm Maria the Hedgehog. Let's continue where we left off, okay? She was about to search through another when a loud clang rang in her ears. Someone or something was banging on the door from the other side. Luckily for her, she found a tiny scalpel hidden in one of the drawers. She pointed it at the door, preparing for the worst. 4 bangs later, she heard the sound of a lock breaking. The door was ajar now. It began to be pushed open slowly, forcing her into action. Raising the scalpel, she rushed toward the door, taking hold of the first person she saw holding the sharp object to their throats. It took her a moment to notice the scruffed gray beard and the soft hazel eyes looking down at her. "Javi?" she exclaimed, dropping the scalpel. It made a clinking sound as it fell near her feet. Javier Garcia straightened himself up, rubbing his throat with a smirk. "That's the Clementine I remember," he said by way of introduction. "What are you doing here?" she asked, still unsure if this was a dream. She looked down at his clothes, which were covered in blood and walker guts. The smell almost made her gag, but she kept it down. "Of course he used my trick," she thought with a smile. "Yeah, we thought we'd rescue you and then go for a bite at McDonald's," he suggested, scratching his chin pensively. She punched him on the shoulder, smirking up at the man. It was then that she noticed Gabe standing outside the door. His clothes were equally stained, as was a good portion of his face. He offered her a small smile, looking quickly downwards, dismissing the weird feeling she got from his distance. She looked back at Javi. "Hey, how did you guys find me?" "Whoever was keeping you here left a clipboard with your name on it, on this rack." He pointed to a small shelf with Madison's notes in it. "I mean, how did you find where I was being held?" "It was all Louis," he said, nodding. "He fought like fire to get to you." "Louis is here?" she exclaimed, looking around the hallway beyond. She noticed it was empty now. The overhead lights was the only company they had left. "He and Asim were getting into their holding cells to get you," he explained, taking the walkie-talkies from his belt and pressing the button. "Guys, we've got Clem. We're on our way to you." Static greeted them, making the pair frown. Gabe tapped Javi on the shoulder and said something in Spanish. Javi responded in his native tongue and nodded, looking back at Clem. "We should get going," he said, taking a metal bat from his back strap. "We may have let a few walkers in with us." "You did what?" she asked, her eyes widening. "We needed a distraction to move around the place undetected," he replied, shrugging. "And not everything went as smooth as paper. More like sandpaper," Gabe piped in with a frown, showing Clem a small cut on his forehead. Pursing her lips, Clementine followed the 2 men through the empty hallway. The beds on the right had been vacated, she noticed. Javi kicked the front door down, looking around when they stepped outside. A soft drizzle had started falling from the sky, dampening the soil around them. She saw dozens of walkers roaming the previous bare streets, their groans growing in volume as bullets flew in every direction. Javier led the 2 of them to the side of the building, surveying the area. Clem kneeled down beside him, realizing just then that they were dangerously close to the walkers. 2 smaller ones wandered close to them, and Javi took out his hunting knife, taking care of them with ease. He slashed the abdomen of one of them open. "Now you have to cover," he said. Shuddering, Clem dug into the walker's insides, smearing the bloody intestines on her clothes. She made her best not gag at the smell, cursing her stomach for wanting to hurl the small dinner she'd been given that day. When she was satisfied with the handiwork, she stood up and examined the area with Javi. A few people were running through the streets, trying their best to avoid detection of the walkers. Most of the soldiers were using their ammo sparingly, presumably because they were short of it. "You guys sure know how to make an entrance," Clem complimented. "In the Garcia style," Javi quipped, huffing out his chest. Once they found a big enough opening in a swarm of walkers flooding the streets, they slowly made their way through them. They walked in a straight line, Javi at the front and Gabe holding the rear. Clementine looked around as they were the traipsed through the undead, maneuvering her body so none of the rogue arms reaching for them would take a hold of her hair or clothes. In barely 2 minutes of that, they reached the edge of the large concrete building. They took a second to check each other for bites and found nothing. Javier signaled something to Gabe, and the young man flipped on his flashlight, shining in the direction of the holding cell door. He made it blink a few times in a pattern and then turned it off. After a few seconds of silence, broken by only by the moans of the walkers and the intermittent gunshots of the soldiers, a flashing light replied from one of the holding cell windows. Javi nodded, and the three of them made their way to the building in question. By the door, the two unconscious guards on the floor, their rifles lying over them. Clem rummaged through the pocket of one of them, smiling when her hand grazed a silver keychain. She took off her cuffs, rubbing her wrists as they fell to the ground. When they knocked, the door opened to reveal Louis standing in the doorway beyond. His hair was matted in grime, a hair tie keeping it all in one place. His usually immaculate brown trench coat was covered in walker intestines and blood. He's gonna be ticked for a week. He's gonna be grumpy for a week, she thought with a smile. It took her a moment to react to his presence, sucking in a deep breath as she laid eyes on his freckled features. Before she could snap out of her trance, she was picked up off the ground and spun around by Louis's strong embrace. She buried her head in the crook of his neck, small tears forming in her eyes. He was finally here. He'd found her. When they stopped spinning, they broke apart slightly, looking into each other's eyes. Golden eyes bore into brown ones with intensity, both of them glistening over from their sheer joy the couple felt. Without hesitation, Clem brought her lips up to his, locking them in a passionate kiss. His hands ran down her back, settling on her waist and pulling her in towards him. Her hands crept up his neck, her fingers digging into his dreads. She always loved doing that. They only broke apart when they heard someone clear their throat. The couple stepped back with ragged breathing, their chests heaving. Gabe was standing beside them, his eyes darting between them. Lovely reunion, but we gotta go before more Morettos show up, he said, making Clem roll her eyes. Unfortunately, his statement became true much sooner than expecting. Seemingly without end, walkers kept flooding into the compound through the gap in one of the west walls. The rain poured down on them, dampening their blood-stained clothes. Javi looked at Asim and frowned. "Where's Violet?" he asked. "The gunfire drew more walkers than expected," he told Javi. "She stayed back with Ten and AJ to make sure we had a safe route back when I gave her the signal," he explained, brandishing his flashlight to the older man. Javi nodded, but Clem was not pleased. "You brought AJ?" she exclaimed, her eyes widening at Louis. "I tried to make him stay, but he wanted to come and rescue you," he defended himself, looking down at her. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but smile. "You raised a fierce little man." Clem squinted at him, but left his jab slide, nodding at him. "At least he's not in the thick of it," she thought to herself. Thunder clapped above them, bringing them back to reality. I think we should split up," Clem suggested. A group this big cannot pass unnoticed in the herd." "She's right," Gabe piped in, nodding. "I'll go with Clem," Louis offered. Clem smiled up at her husband, placing her own hand over his. "You guys go ahead of us. We'll be right behind you." Nodding at the couple, Javi turned to his herd. "Good luck," he said, leading Asim and Gabe into a swarm of undead. And this is where I will stop for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3 of Maria the Hedgehog Reads Chapter 15 of The Walking Dead, Hope.